First of all, I need to apologize for my noisy use of English constructions, which as a non-native speaker of English, I'm not supposed to have. I've read some reviews of Adele Goldberg's latest book, explaining this, creativity, competition, and the partial productivity of constructions. None of them targets the obvious inconsistencies and flaws of this monograph. Probably one of the book's main weaknesses is the definition of the target audience. For example, how can a book whose explanatory power is based on signal detection theory and Bayesian inference, as a theoretical support for construction grammar, be sold as an accessible introduction to students, teachers, and researchers? The introduction announces what lies ahead in terms of explanatory clarity and theoretical depth, a succession of poorly organized chapters that fail to provide cogent arguments regarding the role of language in our construction of reality. Granted, construction grammar, including Goldberg's cognitive construction grammar, is not a theory of mind, not even a theory of language, but a framework. Yet, a number of ungrounded claims are uttered that make the reader believe that there is indeed a theory backing up the author's assertions. However, after some written time, it becomes evident that something does not gel. Despite Goldberg's strategy to anticipate criticisms, the author's Newtonian reduction of linguistic phenomena to principles. Linguistics, however, is not physics. Sounds as an unnecessary imposture, which nonetheless can be easily falsified, since the mind is not reducible to computer metaphors. Moreover, the brain does not have to work in the ways prescribed by computer science. Consequently, the sense-made principles can be challenged as follows. Convention is not a measure for efficiency in language, since the speakers creatively push the boundaries of convention beyond statistical prediction to meet specific communicative goals. Long-term memory is shaped by the interaction of bodily acquired signals and precognized memory traces, which are not merely lossy, underrepresented. Memory traces, partially stored semiotic processes, are captured by constructional attachment patterns, not by constructions per se. Perceptual memory and conceptualization are not only connected by information-weighing inferential processes, Bayesian, since utterances serve as belief-updating devices containing perceptually driven conceptual content. They are not simply combinable symbolic strings. It is unlikely that the whole repertoire of constructions becomes activated in order to produce context-specific messages. This form of competition would be inefficient given its computing complexity. Admittedly, in controlled experimental settings, such as the ones described by Goldberg, this complexity can be reduced by means of prompts that guide the linguistic behavior of the participants. And yet, participants do not engage in information retrieval, but heuristic, cue-driven selections. Prior-posterior prediction error, Bayesian reasoning, is not enough to account for the whole process of linguistic reconstruction of reality. It is hubris to think that the native use of English, standard American English, can offer a model that provides generalizations regarding language processing and learning in general. In this sense, Goldberg's monoglossian baseline strikes as a ghost from a time when language was explained through recourse to references to American culture. Regrettably, Goldberg's limited acquaintance with non-English languages makes her sleep in a number of inaccurate claims. For example, that Spanish does not allow creative novel uses of verbs to different extents for different constructions. However, in Spanish, verbs like renunciar a, give up, quit, can be used transitively too. Thus, in the sentence, lo renunciaron, they quit him. The transitive use of renunciar implies irony, sometimes with humorous connotations, which clearly contradicts Goldberg's sweeping generalizations. What this example shows is creativity is not constrained by the linguistic system, but shaped by intention. Goldberg's characterization of concepts is confusing. The word is actually mentioned only 4 times in the book. In a part of the text does she explain how concepts are formed in the mind, or depicted as memory traces, a term that may mean many things or nothing at all. The question is, how can Goldberg explain statistical preemption, creativity, competition, and partial productivity without having a clear idea of what counts as a concept? After reading the book, my conclusion is that it's simply a glorified draft. In this sense, apart from Goldberg's undeniable influence in the field of cognitive linguistics, it is a complete mystery to me why this book was published, considering its shortcomings. It is also repetitive. Most of its content can be read in Goldberg's previous publications. The essentialist mindset is clear in this book. Indeed, the book's shaky premises pave the road to unjustified conclusions like, for example, that L1 speakers, native English speakers, have access to constructions, while L2 users, non-native English speakers, are only equipped with shadows of linguistic representation. Now, this might be said to be an unwarranted assumption, since the search for forms of noisy linguistic representation reduces the complexity of multilingual processing, including, for example, the influence of psychotypology on the target language, the role of recency of use, the levels of proficiency in the target language, or the foreign language effect, to a mechanistic identification of simple sentence patterns stored in the construct icon. This essentialist generalization is accomplished through depositing of some mysterious memory traces, providing native speakers of English with advantageous representational anchor points for the identification of specific sentence types, while L2 speakers can only gain access to noisy memory traces, a term derived from mathematical psychology, in particular signal detection theory, enabling them to expand linguistic judgment beyond the conventions of the language available to L1 speakers. What this shows is that the use of construction grammar as a framework informing experimental designs is problematic, since it exemplifies the common presupposition that abstract mental representations correspond to persistent, stored summary representations. Inevitably, the first and most general objection to the theoretical basis of the book is that it creates an undue disconnect between perception and central cognitive processes. In this sense, language is conceptualized as an autonomous system governed by statistically driven symbolic combinatorics and influenced by speaker meaning. It's noted some theoretical basis is missing. For example, what does the author understand by representation, perception, or conceptualization? Are concepts prototypes, mini theories, or sets of exemplars? How do concepts acquire linguistic coding? What is the role of concepts in categorization, inference, and thought formation? None of these foundational questions are plausibly addressed by Goldberg. In some, Goldberg's book epitomizes the jaded conceptual repertoire of cognitive construction grammar. It also calls for a paradigmatic shift on the basis of a different set of questions that, hopefully, will provide answers regarding the relation between body, mind, and language.